22 minutes before 8, views coming in on that LBC exclusive regarding the former copper on the Cyril Smith case. We'll come to those in just a second. Come back to the revelations you've heard here on LBC this morning. A former police officer being told from a senior officer to stand down inquiries into the Cyril Smith paedophile story, that despite having rounded up some people who had some information. Johnny in Brixton says a long game in place here as abused children being abused by the abuse of the Official Secrets Act. Perverse establishment, question mark. Becky says, wouldn't it have been nice if one of the party's promises was to amend the Official Secrets Act so paedophile MPs could be named? Yes, it's stirring up a fair degree of anger. All right, coming up after the news as I've right on to other matters. Front pages. We looked at this in our review of the front pages in the first hour. A veteran Labour politician is reportedly to escape charges for the second time over alleged child sex crimes. It's a decision, says the paper, that will prompt anger at prosecutors and also fuel claims of an establishment cover-up. Alison Saunders, who's the DPP, Director of Public Prosecutions, is to announce today, says the paper, it would not be in the public interest to put on trial Lord Janner of Braunstone, former Greville Janner, former MP for Leicester West, for historical abuse allegations. Crown Prosecution Service lawyers have spent 9 months studying volumes of evidence gathered by Leicestershire's police's operation in Namel. Detectives have interviewed more than 20 men who claim they were abused by Lord Janner in their youth. I need to stress, Lord Janner has consistently denied all these allegations. Dr. Bernard Gallagher is child protection expert and reader in social work and applied social studies at the University of Huddersfield. Joins me now, and I know I can rely on you, Doctor, not to make any unfounded allegations and respect this man's claims, sir, of not being involved in this. But what might it be doing for victims out there? Good morning.
I think it is sending a worrying message because there is currently a major issue around the fact that, the suspicions that people in positions of power have for decades been sexually abusing children and had their crimes covered up by the authorities. That's the allegations. Now, we have a case again today of another powerful individual against whom there's similar allegations, and as you've said, the CPS aren't proceeding with it. I was aware of these allegations when they initially arose a couple of decades ago, and I believe at that time there's only one individual making claims against Lord Janner. But according to the current reports, police have got allegations from more than 20 men, so one would think that's a very strong case.
Again, he, of course, protests his innocence, but what would be served by sending a frail 86-year-old man to jail?
Well, no one's necessarily saying he would go to jail, but obviously it's essential, particularly where there's such serious crimes, that people are brought before the authorities and those allegations are tested out. Now, if it is the case that he is, very frail, perhaps ill, then it would be appropriate for the CPS not to proceed on the grounds of public interest. My concern there would be, I really hope, and I simply don't know, but I really hope that the authorities are, got bona fide concerns about his ill health, basically.
All right, Dr. Bernard Gallagher, you're a child protection expert, reader in social work and applied social studies at the University of Huddersfield. Lord Janner was first accused of abuse in 1991 by a witness at the trial of Frank Beck, a serial abuser who ran children's homes in Leicestershire. One of the detectives on the case then was Mick Creedon. He's now Chief Constable at Derbyshire. He told The Times there was credible evidence against Lord Janner. He and his colleagues wanted to make an arrest but were prevented by more senior people from doing so. Goodness me, where did we hear that? That's right, about half an hour ago in the case of the Cyril Smith inquiry you heard exclusively on LBC. Creedon goes on, the decision was a clear one. He will be interviewed by appointment. There won't be a search of his home address or his constituency office or his office in the House of Commons. An appointment was made for Lord Janner to be interviewed at a police station in Leicester. He attended with a solicitor and gave no comment answers. The CPS decided at the time there was no evidence to warrant charging the backbencher. Lord Janner returned to the Commons after the controversy to a rousing reception. He told Parliament the claims against him consisted of disgraceful, contemptible and totally untrue allegations. And again, I stress, Lord Janner denies all those allegations. Phil's in North Lincolnshire on the more general subject of the problems with these inquiries that will need to take place. Phil, what can you tell me?
Well, all I wanted to say, that last story around Lord Janner, again, it just puts the cloud over it again a little bit. It makes me feel as if, here we go, it's still being hushed up. There's still influence there. But I just wanted to say that as a member of public and a citizen of this country, if I was ever asked to sit on a jury on a case that was brought against a police officer under the Official Secrets Act regarding cover-up of this, there's no way would I find them guilty. As a member of the public, that would be my duty to try and do my part to bring this into the open. I have a great deal of respect for the police, and I feel that the police have been abused, and they really need to come out into the light and believe that the public will support them in this.
Well said. I think so many people would agree with what you say. It does need one very courageous ex-copper to come forward and say, all right, I'll take it on. My name is Arthur Farnes-Barnes, and I name these people, and let's see where that goes there. Phil, thank you. Back to the growing pressure regarding these inquiries into various affairs and police investigations into paedophile rings and cover-ups. Terry's in Cobham. Terry.
Hello, Nick. I'm not going to say anything wrong, but regarding Jenner and Cyril Smith, just us maybe at the top of the tree, we don't know. If it was you or the your producer just talked to me, and anything like that happened, or any thoughts like that, you would have been arrested initially. Arrested. Yep. When you're arrested, you're cautioned, and when you're cautioned, you then do your police interview, and you are told that any time that you say anything, a no comment answer will be could affect your trial when you go to trial, because you've not answered, and you can't use evidence that you should have used to answer that question when you go in front of a jury or the bench. Yep. And he did none of them. I mean, obviously Cyril Smith was never charged or anything, or even asked to do an interview. Jenner has been asked to do that, but the old saying, birds of a feather stick together. And if you just look at it from a massive picture, you, me, and your producer, you would have been arrested. He was not arrested, and he was not charged, and the CPS have allowed him off. So that means if we wouldn't have been arrested or done, there must be another rule for them. It's as clear as that. We don't have to say anymore. We don't have to say nothing bad or serious, but you know and I know and the British public know.
Yep. I won't say let him off because that's implying guilt, but they decided not to proceed. Just to clarify all of that, Terry, thank you. We'll talk again soon. All right, in the next LBC News headlines, Lisa Aziz.
An ex-undercover Met police officers told LBC he was forced to release 5 men who admitted being part of a paedophile ring with the late Sir Cyril Smith.
Story that won't go away. I think when this paedophile story actually breaks and names are named and hopefully coppers are identified who covered up, it will be... I remember saying, and I actually wrote in my column in the Sunday Express, that it will break at some point this year. I'm confident it will, and it will be massive. It's just teetering. It's waiting to go. Chris is in Wallington. It would be good to finally get to the bottom of this, wouldn't it, Chris?
Morning, Nick. Yeah. I think the fact that the guy's been accused of these horrific crimes, and I have to say, if it was me, as a normal member of the public, I would welcome the police coming round, because if I knew I was innocent, I would want to be cleared publicly. The fact that he keeps buffing it off, saying that they're spurious claims, just makes him look more guilty. And of course he denies it, but in the world...
Hold on. Sorry, I've got to be careful. here. You can't say he denies it. We can't say, of course, we just say he denies it. And I stress again, there is absolutely nothing, of course, that we can say about that, because Lord Janner continues to deny the allegations. So let's tread carefully. Back to you, Chris.
Let him go and see the police. Let them do the due diligence, and then if he's cleared, everyone knows he's clear. At the moment, we don't know, so there's a lot of... Where there's smoke and that sort of thing, Nick, people will assume he's guilty.
I know, and I'm Chris, you're not wrong. You have to understand, I have to protect the licence of this radio station, and indeed myself for that matter, just to say tight to the law, but... I wish, in a way, all of you now, I could read some of these emails, texts and tweets that are coming in, but I can't. In fact, this new set I'm looking at now, I can't even read that, actually. Let's just say some people in positions will do all they can to keep the truth from us. We'll never get to the truth. They find a way. They will always find a way out. Trust me, that's Brian in Rotherham. This one from Gary in Harrow. There's only one reason why this inquiry is being delayed. Could it be they are waiting for suspects to die so they cannot be implicated, or others implicated at police interviews who look the other way? You see, I'm having to change all of them, but do keep them coming. I'll find a way to get them out there. That's my job. That's my concern. Don't worry about that. We're going to put the last of the big 4 manifestos to the test. Back to the paedophile story, the inquiry, the story that's been broken by LBC during this hour. I remind you there's more to come on that with my colleague Ian Dale this afternoon from 4. That interview in full. This is what you're saying, Roger Hext. If a criminal act is revealed, nobody apart from the Queen is above the law. There is no legislation that allows the suppression of an illegal act. And Mr. Hext is writing, he says, as a retired senior police officer. John Presley in Burnham-on-Sea in Somerset, similar theme. It really is a load of rubbish. The Official Secrets Act would be used against any police that want to speak up about the paedophile cover-up. This is no longer a matter of national security. Full stop. It's pretty common knowledge this goes further back than Cyril Smith and involves a member of the House of Lords, a previous Prime Minister, a prominent member of the London underworld, and others, just to mention a few. Most of them that are being protected are now dead, but the scandal will blow a hole in British politics. I think I agree with just about every word of that. Mark and Barnet, you're on the radio. Hello.
Oh, morning, Nick. I just wanted to say, I mean, you'll be aware more than anyone, the number of journalists, a lot of them from The Sun, but other newspapers that have been routinely arrested, charged, left on bail for God knows how long, and then eventually taken to court and almost universally found innocent by a jury of their peers. The Crown prosecution were very, very quick on the flimsiest of evidence to arrest those people because they were necessarily divulging things that they weren't comfortable with them divulging. And yet, the thing that really worries me about this is that other people have said this quite rightly, that these people in power would do absolutely anything to protect themselves and their own. And if it ever came to a situation where a copper put his head above the parapet and said, supposedly, ludicrously broke the so-called Official Secrets Act, he would be prosecuted. They know that if he was ever prosecuted, a jury of his peers would always certainly find him innocent. And I wouldn't be surprised if these authorities found a way of circumventing justice in that respect.
I will leave it there, Mark, only for time reasons. Thank you. Anne in Ruislip, we pursue alleged war criminals irrespective of their ages. So what is the difference in these cases of potential paedophilia? It stinks of the so-called establishment protecting their own, and these are the people we're expected to respect and allow to govern us. Mike in Crawley, I sincerely hope the CPS are going to proceed with the prosecution. Health and age did not seem to be a bar to prosecution of Rolf Harris or Stuart Hall. Of course, they were not part of the establishment in the same way. Until someone of this stature is brought to court, suspicion and distrust of politicians will still remain. All right, maybe more of that in the next...
From Global's newsroom, an ex-undercover police officer claims he was told to release 5 men who admitted being part of a paedophile ring with former MP Cyril Smith. In an exclusive interview, the ex-Met officer says an operation in the late 1970s was shut down after the men said they were connected to the former Liberal MP. He's broken the Official Secrets Act to speak exclusively to LBC, and his voice has been disguised to protect his identity. He says when the men were arrested, they admitted to being part of a child abuse gang.
When we put it to them and give them times they went in, times we'd seen them previously, and how that coincided with, young people going in there. A couple of them sort of put their hands up and started talking to try and get themselves out of trouble. They did name a very prominent politician at the time.
You can hear the full interview with Ian Dale at Drive on LBC.
All right, let's get straight to these questions, Mr. Clegg. David is in Enfield and you're the first through to the Deputy Prime Minister. Go ahead, David.
Good morning, Nick. Good morning, Mr. Clegg.
Morning, David.
Mr. Clegg, my question relates to the child abuse scandal. It's 2 parts. On the 23rd of February this year, your party, supported by the Conservatives, voted against an amendment to the Serious Crime Bill proposed by Labour MP John Mann to protect police officers from prosecution under the Official Secrets Act. This vote took place at 9:15 in the evening and went unreported at the time. So my first point is, why did you not support this proposal? And my second question is, according to the local newspapers in Sheffield, between 2001 and 2013, 660 girls, some as young as 12, suffered serious sexual abuse in Sheffield, to which the authorities turned a blind eye. Now, the town has a number of Liberal Democrat councillors, and you're a local MP. Were you aware of what was going on?
So, David, on the latter point, of course... sorry, are you asking, was I aware back in 2001 about the allegations of this very serious and horrific level of abuse? Clearly not. I mean, sorry, of course not. I mean, I'm as I'm as shocked as anybody else, not just with that revelation about what was happening in South Yorkshire, Rotherham and Sheffield, or alleged to be happening, but also elsewhere in the country. And that the way in which, with each passing month, the lid appears to be being lifted on a kind of pattern of large-scale abuse, which is unimaginable to any sort of normal person, and seems to be happening in different parts of the country. No, of course I wasn't aware of it, and I, like you, no doubt, David, I want to see the truth come out. I want to see the police now get to the bottom of what happened, and I want to see the perpetrators punished. On the Serious Crime Bill amendment, David, forgive me, as you can imagine, there are lots and lots of amendments which are always sort of put forward to bits of legislation as they pass through Parliament. And in this case, I guess Theresa May would have taken a view, I'm assuming, but I can check for you if you like, I can check with the Home Office, would have taken a view that the protections, at least the way you describe it to me, are sufficient to allow any police officer to come forward. And I would certainly urge not only police officers, but anybody who has any information to come forward and do so without any fear of recrimination or any fear of any impact on their livelihood or their careers. But I can, if you wish, David, try and find out the detail about whether John Mann's amendment really did meet that test or not.
What response from you, David?
I find that unbelievable, because the amendment was very clear, and in fact your MPs voted overwhelmingly with the Conservatives against passing that amendment, which was supported by all the Labour MPs and one or two dissenting Conservative and Liberal Democrat MPs. I find it amazing. I'm not aware of it.
Well, you shouldn't be that amazed, David, in the sense that it is a very, very important issue. You and I are not going to disagree that we want particularly retired police officers who feel that they have information which can cast more light on these terrible allegations to come forward and do so without any fear of any impact on their livelihood, on their pensions, on their retirement arrangements and so on. And of course, the suggestion that there's any dissent with that, of course, you're sort of only implying that, of course, is not the case. Everybody wants the same thing. I am assuming, but I can only assume, David, I'm just being very open with you, I can only assume that the Home Office judged that John Mann's amendment was either not didn't quite fit the bill, might not have been technically correct, or that there are provisions elsewhere in the bill or even other amendments which met the same objective. But if I may, I will make sure that someone I get back to you with more details about that particular amendment.
Mr. Clegg, I don't know if you've yet had sight of the front page of the Times, but it is reported that Alison Saunders, the Director of Public Prosecutions, will announce today it would not be in the public interest to put on trial formerly Greville, now Lord Janner of Braunston QC, the former MP for Leicester West, for historical abuse allegations. This is the second time that he would escape charges. He, of course, denies all these allegations. Is it in the public interest not to proceed?
Well, that, as you know, is not a judgment for. It's precisely right that is a judgment for the Crown Prosecution Service and for the DPP.
Seems to be at odds with what Ms. Saunders said last year. They would pursue justice for victims whether it took 30 days or 30 years.
Yes, but the problem that you and I have is that we don't know, if I understand it correctly, she hasn't yet made an announcement, and we don't know. And if she were to make that announcement, I'm assuming she would explain her reasons, because everybody would be entitled
well, it would appear possibly, sadly, Lord Janner is in poor health.
Well, I'm sorry. I just don't know what the DPP is going to say about this. She's entirely independent. I don't know what reasons she might give if she were to decide that they can't proceed with this case. But in a justice system, in a democratic society, it is quite right that it is not up to the whims and wishes of politicians. It is up to the prosecuting authorities to pursue justice without fear or favour. And just as you've alluded to yourself, I've been impressed with what she said about the need for the long arm of justice to reach across time, across space, to do so, even if it reaches up to the highest reaches of British society and the British establishment. And she has a reputation for doing so fearlessly. So if she were to decide otherwise in this particular case, I'm assuming she will explain why. But we're going to have to wait until we hear that explanation to know more.
Well, we don't have to wait to hear this. In an LBC exclusive in the previous hour, a former undercover Metropolitan Police officer has said he was forced to release 5 men who admitted being part of a paedophile ring with the late Liberal MP Cyril Smith. He's known as John. The officer said the men admitted to being involved with Smith. We've disguised his voice. Here's a little of what he told us.
He was part of shared their interests, and that they had been with him on occasions elsewhere. Certainly that they'd been in establishments where Cyril Smith was there and where that sort of activity was taking place. It was reported back, obviously. Had to report to the senior officers at the time, the senior investigating officer, and I assumed that he then had to report that elsewhere. Very shortly after that, the inquiry was closed.
So they've told you that they've been involved in this?
Yes.
They've told you that they've been involved in this with an MP?
Yes.
Suddenly the whole thing gets shut down?
Yes.
What are you doing within the Liberal Democrat Party to investigate claims regarding the late Liberal MP Cyril Smith?
Well, we will cooperate, of course.
No, but what are you doing within the Liberal Democrat Party itself?
Well, hang on, let me be very clear. The chap, John, you just talked, you just had, you just played the excerpt. What is really shocking is he said that he reported it up to his senior officers. He then said, I think he used the phrase, they reported it elsewhere, I guess further up the chain within the police, and that for some reason then the police, someone, somewhere in the chain of command, decided not to pursue the inquiry. So very, very serious questions, of course, need to be asked now about why on earth the police didn't do what they are supposed to do, which is to investigate evidence of crime where that is presented to them, as it clearly was in this case. And if the police didn't do so in the past, they must do so now, and I'm sure they are. And the Liberal Democrats, and indeed anybody else who's got any information, should make that available to the police. And that's what we could. You can't. No organisation can replace the police, and the police must now do the job which clearly wasn't done by the police in the past. I clearly don't know why the police and in what way the police were discouraged from pursuing that inquiry. I've written to all Liberal Democrat MPs and all peers and to tell them to cooperate fully with the police if they're approached by the police.
But why not hold your own inquiry, lastly?
Well, for starters, the allegations about Cyril Smith actually stretched back to a time when he was a Labour politician rather than a Liberal Democrat. Then he was a Liberal politician, a party which then became subsumed into what is now the Liberal Democrats. As I say, what I can do, what I must do, and I have done, is told all peers and MPs, look, if you think you have any information about this, and certainly if the come forward to the police, and of course if the police ask you for any information, yes, bring that forward. But if it...
Respectfully, you've not answered why not hold your own inquiry?
Because there's no... you suggest that it might be some treasure trove of documents the Liberal Democrats hold about the activity of a man who got up to these things apparently before he was even a Liberal, yet alone Liberal Democrat.
But possibly during the time he was a Liberal as well.
Well, but don't you think that the only people who can deliver justice are the police? I mean, I'm sort of surprised sometimes when people say that someone else should deliver. It is for the police to do so, and it is for everybody else to make information available to the police. And that, of course, is what I've said as leader of the Liberal Democrats. Anybody who has any recollection or any information about that era, however many years ago, should make that information available to the police. But I'm not going to sort of somehow elevate a political party to replace the police. Only the police can do that job for us. They clearly didn't do so in the past. We need to know why not, but we now need to make sure that if anybody has any information which is of use to the police, it is provided to them.
We move to other calls. Cara in Covent.
Now, as you've been hearing on LBC, an ex-undercover police officer claims he was told to release 5 men who admitted being part of a paedophile ring with former MP Cyril Smith. In an exclusive interview for Drive, the ex-Met officer says an operation in the late 1970s was shut down after the men said they were connected to the former Liberal MP. And there's more. The officer, known as John, has told Drive that police were aware of paedophilia and organised prostitution that was taking place at Dolphin Sq in Westminster in the late 1970s. Our senior reporter Tom Swarbrick has the story. Tom, what do we know?
Well, a police officer working undercover in the late 1970s, he puts it around 77, 78, is monitoring an alleged paedophile ring in a cafe in central London near Whitechapel. They were tipped off by a concerned parent who said children were being taken into the cafe by different men. We've called the officer John. It's not his real name. We've disguised his voice to protect his identity. This is what happened to his investigation.
We had observation vehicles that you could park up and watch from there, or sit in a flat locally.
And what kind of things were you seeing?
Just during the lunch hours and sort of early after school, lots of men going in, spending a lot more time in there than you would have done just to go and have a coffee and a sandwich.
And there were children going in and out at those times as well?
During the breaks, yeah, lunch breaks and after school.
So in your mind, you're fairly clear that there's something going on here that really needs to be shut down?
Oh, we were all determined that was the situation, yeah.
Describe the raid of that place.
You know, it's basically just walk in and grab hold of everybody that's in there, get them back to the station and question them.
How many did you get hold of?
I think on one particular day there was 5.
And when you got them back, what did they say? What did they talk about? What did you ask them?
Well, they deny it all, of course. But when we put it to them and give them times they went in, times we'd seen them previously, and how that coincided with, you know, young people going in there, a couple of them sort of put their hands up and started talking.
And they mentioned names as well, didn't they? Who did they name?
Yeah, I suppose to try and get themselves out of trouble, but they did name a very prominent politician at the time, who was a popular favourite up in Yorkshire, where he came from, and it was rather a large man.
This is Cyril Smith?
It was indeed, yeah.
And what did they have to say about him?
Just that he was part of or shared their interests, shall we say, and that they had been with him on occasions elsewhere.
Did they say where?
Not that I can recall now, no, it's a long time ago.
But they made it clear to you that they had been involved in paedophilia with Cyril Smith, seen him do it, been there with him when it was happening? Certainly
that they'd been in establishments where Cyril Smith was there and where that sort of activity was taking place.
And when you heard that, what did you do?
Well, it was reported back, obviously. I had to review a report to the senior officers at the time, the senior investigating officer. And I assumed that he then had to report that elsewhere. Very shortly after that, the inquiry was closed.
Your inquiry into this gang?
Yes. Yeah, it was closed down.
Describe how that happened. Where were you when you were told that it was finished?
We were at the station, and we were just told that there was no that the case didn't have any legs, and that we were put on other inquiries.
These 5 men who you took into the police station, what happened to them?
They were released.
So they've told you that they've been involved in this?
Yes.
They've told you that they've been involved in this with an MP?
Yes.
Suddenly the whole thing gets shut down?
Yes.
How do you think that came about, and what was your reaction to it?
We were all frustrated, obviously. And it can only have come from a much higher power.
Now, these allegations are serious enough. 5 men who admitted to being part of a paedophile ring were let back onto the streets, John says, entirely because of their links to Sir Cyril Smith. But there's more. Speaking exclusively to the programme, John, who chose to break the Official Secrets Act to tell his story, says investigating officers were certain that child abuse was being carried out by members of Parliament and other senior officials at the Dolphin Sq apartment block near Westminster. This is where, Ian, it's alleged that 3 children were murdered by a paedophile ring connected to MPs. And John has told Drive that officers within the Met were aware.
I mean, it was also reasonably common knowledge, certainly within certain groups of the investigating establishment, shall we say, that there was a lot of activity at Dolphin Sq.
So police officers at the time knew or were hearing rumours of MPs involved with paedophilia at Dolphin Sq?
From my perspective, obviously that would only be hearsay. I've got no hard evidence of that, but yeah.
And so Dolphin Sq also came up as part of these 5 being questioned.
I couldn't say definitely yes. All I can say is at the time that Dolphin Sq was certainly mentioned, even if it wasn't mentioned by these 5. I did some work on another team And as part of that, we did a lot of investigations around the West End, around prostitution and drugs and sort of crimes. And a number of the leads, shall we say, pointed straight back to Dolphin Square, whether that's because that's where people were living or whether they were taking part in these, shall we say, nefarious activities.
And who were those leads? Were they members of Parliament, people in the establishment?
There was a lot of names flying about at the time, and very few of which I could remember now, a long time ago, or choose to remember. Yeah.
How much do you think was true, and how much do you think was hearsay?
From the people I was getting it from, probably 95% true.
That's pretty shocking, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. This wasn't all about paedophiles. This was lots of other stuff that was going on there. Organised prostitution, all sorts of stuff.
Tom, listening to John there, I think a lot of people will be thinking, if the police were aware of criminal activity, particularly at Dolphin Square, also related to Cyril Smith, why would they not have acted? I mean, why would they be so interested in covering all of this activity up?
I think it's because of the people with whom it was linked. So to have a allegation surfacing about a sitting MP involved allegedly in these kind of activities is not palatable. And part of the problem has been the constraint that the Official Secrets Act, which, as I said, John has had to break to talk to us, has put on people. And one of the questions to arise from this, as you said, is not only, who and why was this covered up, but also what is the Official Secrets Act there to protect? Is it to protect the people who know things who shouldn't know certain things from ever talking about them? Or is it to protect the public? And one of the questions that has been rolling around John's mind, and indeed one of the reasons why he wanted to come and tell his story to us, was that he felt the time had come to say, you know what, I'm not answerable to my boss, I'm answerable to the public. And that's the distinction, and that's what's been arguably taken too long to come out, and possibly why certain allegations like these, like the one we've seen that are denied by the veteran Labour peer, Greville Jenner, have finally coming to light.
And there will probably be many other Johns out there who know the sort of detail that he does. And I think there'll now be a lot of pressure on Theresa May to say or the Attorney General to say, look, we will lift the Official Secrets Act if you have information on this sort of thing, because any prosecution under the Official Secrets Act has to go through the Attorney General. And if the Attorney General says, look, I'm not going to prosecute, anyone can come forward and they can tell their story, surely that will encourage more people to come forward. In fact, if they'd like to contact us, we will treat you with complete confidentiality, and we can hopefully help you tell your story so it does have an impact. As
John did. I mean, that's, John rang your programme, and, that's how we got in touch with John in the first place. So I think more and more former police officers are seeing the media as a good outlet because of protection and anonymity that we can give. And, at the end of the day, these are people with homes to pay the mortgage on and food to put on the table, and anybody found breaking the Official Secrets Act potentially could lose all of that.
Tom Swarbrick, great work. Thank you very much indeed. Well, we'll be taking your calls. We'll also be talking to Simon Danchuk, who has written a book about Cyril Smith, and is obviously the Labour politician, has been MP for Rochdale over the last 5 years. But I want to also talk about Greville Jenner. I want to know from you why you think there is such a cover-up seemingly going on from the 70s and 80s by establishment figures. Greville Jenner is not going to face court action over the, 9 counts of child abuse that he was accused of because he's got dementia. Does that reek of another cover-up? The CPS says not. We'll hear from them as well. 0345 6060 973. This is LBC at 16 minutes past 5.
The Crown Prosecution Service has admitted it was wrong not to prosecute former MP Lord Janner years ago over alleged child sex abuse.
21 minutes past 5 here on LBC. We're talking about the child sex abuse inquiry, which we have talked about a lot on the programme, and I'm glad we have, because otherwise we wouldn't have heard from John, the ex-policeman that we heard from there, because he phoned in some time ago to the programme to tell us about what he remembers from the 1970s, when as a police officer he was in the middle of an inquiry which involved Cyril Smith and then was told to shut it down. Now, my suspicion is that this happened also with Greville Janner back in the day, and it will have happened to others as well, people that we don't know about at the moment. Now, I'm not saying that there were sort of 50 or 60 inquiries going on that were all shut down, but it does seem more than a coincidence that the police decided to shut this inquiry down just because it seemed to involve a member of Parliament. Now, Lord Janner, we hear today, is not going to face charges from the Crown Prosecution Service because he's got severe dementia. I should tell you that he last took part in a debate in the House of Lords in December 2013, so only 18 months ago. I've personally seen him in Parliament since then. And I'm not questioning the doctor's decision. Apparently there were 4 doctors that diagnosed him. But I think about the victims here. I think they should have their day in court. And I think for the Crown Prosecution Service to say that he shouldn't face the force of the law just because he has dementia, to me, is the wrong decision. We'll hear a little bit later what the Crown Prosecution Service have said in justification for that. But first I want to talk to Simon Danchuk. He was the Labour MP who exposed Cyril Smith in his book Smile for the Camera, and Simon joins me now. Simon, good afternoon. Give us your reaction to what we heard there from John, the ex-policeman.
Well, it doesn't come as a surprise to me. We know that I think it's an excellent piece of journalism, I have to say, but it confirms a number of things. First of all, Cyril Smith was a prolific abuser of children. We know this from him committing this sort of abuse at Coronation Buildings in South London, at Elm Guest House in South London, through to trying to molest a boy in the Liberal Club in Westminster, through to being cited at a flat in North London, and also all the places that he committed abuse in and around Rochdale, not least Knollview School and Cambridge House. So he was committed very much to abusing children, and this is another example of a former police officer coming forward. All credit to him. I've spoken to a number of Met police officers who've shared similar stories about Smith, and indeed I've spoken to Lancashire police officers and Greater Manchester. And
had you heard about this cafe that John was talking about?
No, I hadn't, but it fits the modus operandi, a network of paedophiles coming together at a place where youngsters might go, in this case a cafe. They were networked, as has been shown, with Cyril Smith. He was part of a number of networks, whether they were in London, whether they were in and around Rochdale, or even in other places as well, and that's what enabled him to commit the abuse that he did do.
Now, what about the Official Secrets Act here? Because by speaking to us, John has broken it. The Home Secretary has not said that it will be lifted in cases of people coming forward, although she said that prosecution is highly unlikely. That would have to be the Attorney General bringing in prosecution, so I suppose it is unlikely. But you can understand the reluctance of former police officers to come forward if they have even a risk. Would you like to see more people coming forward?
Yeah, certainly. It has put former officers coming forward and sharing what they do know. I know that from the work that I've done. The Prime Minister also said relatively recently that he didn't think anybody would be prosecuted under the Official Secrets Act for sharing this sort of information. But there is a real reticence, and I understand it from former police officers and probably others, actually, in terms of sharing what they know. But I do think the dam has been broken. I've said for quite some time I think there's some inevitability about this, that more will come out, and with more work, particularly by journalists and former police officers coming forward, victims sharing their stories, I think there's some inevitability that we will just learn so much more about what went on.
Now, we know about Cyril Smith. We know about the allegations against Lord Janner. Yeah. A lot of people suspect that there are a lot of other big names that we don't know about. Are you as sure as you can be that there are quite a few that inevitably will come out over the course of the next few months, hopefully?
yes, I think they will come out. I've obviously known about Lord Janner for quite some time. I met with Leicestershire Police 12 months ago at their request to talk about the modus operandi of a political figure who is allegedly committing child sexual abuse, and we spoke for about 2 hours in my constituency office with senior Leicestershire police officers about the allegations against Lord Janner. The allegations, in terms of what the victims went through, were absolutely stomach-churning allegations of abuse that one shouldn't have to listen to. And it must be absolutely awful for the victims to know that a case is now going to be prosecuted against him. Absolutely terrible.
I mean, you were first elected in May 2010. This is sort of this whole issue has dominated your first 5 years in Parliament, and it's been quite an emotional time for you as well.
Yeah, that's right. But listen, it's nothing compared to what victims of child sexual abuse have gone through and lived with subsequently. So I consider myself lucky in many regards. And it's not really a campaign that I've wanted to champion, but once you set off down a route in relation to this type of issue, then there is really an obligation to continue until we get some satisfaction.
One of the most graphic things I think that we took from that conversation with John was that the activities at Dolphin Square were not only common knowledge in politics, but also among the police force. I mean, how to what extent do you think criminal activities did take place there, and how much have you learnt about Dolphin Square in your investigations?
Yeah, I think they were all... I mean, what is interesting is that I think there were all different models of abuse being committed. So I think there were some abusers, powerful people who were sort of committing abuse very much on their own. There were others who were very well networked. Cyril Smith would be an example of that. Some attending sex parties in the 70s and into the 80s where a number of politicians would be present, and I think there's more to come out in relation to that. Some of that would connect in to Dolphin Square. So there was lots of abuse going on. I don't think that can be denied, and a lot more of it's come out, and Dolphin Square does feature in that, but as do many other places. I mean, Elm Guesthouse is the other place, but not as salubrious as...
And I mean, John Mann, who we talked to on these issues as well, he's said that he has been handed a list of a lot of names, some of them household names, many of them still living. I imagine that there are people that you and I are both familiar with that you know about that haven't come into the public domain yet.
That's right, and but again, I think from some of the people that I've spoken to, not least one particular survivor of child sexual abuse, I think that it's inevitable that some of those names will come into the public domain within the next few months.
Simon Dantruk, thank you very much indeed. That's Simon Dantruk, who was Labour MP for Rochdale between May 2010 and April 2015. Now, Paul in London says, read John the policeman, I'm speechless, I've nothing else to say. Julian Suffolk says legal experts are saying that any judge would throw the case against Janner out because he's not fit to instruct his lawyers, regardless of the CPS decision. The real tragedy is he wasn't prosecuted years ago. And as we've heard today from the Crown Prosecution Service, 3 times in the last 15 years, they could have prosecuted him and they chose not to. No wonder people think that there's an establishment cover-up, because from what we understand today from the CPS, there has been. 0345 6060 973. Your reaction to Tom Swarbrick's report with John, the ex-policeman, and also what Simon Dantruk has had to say there, and what do you think should have happened in the case of Lord Janner? I'm Ian Dale at Drive, LBC News Time. It's 5:30.
Leicestershire Police is threatening legal action against the decision not to prosecute Lord Janner over alleged child sex abuse. The former MP for Leicester won't face a trial because the Crown Prosecution Service say his dementia is too severe. An ex-undercover police officer has told LBC he was told to release 5 men in the 1970s who admitted being involved in a paedophile ring with former MP Cyril Smith. John, not his real name, says an operation into the group was shut down after the men said they were connected to the late Liberal politician.
Let's carry on with our discussion about the child sex abuse inquiry, and particularly in reference to the interview that my colleague Tom Swarbrick did with the ex-police officer John, who made some astonishing allegations. We heard from him a few months ago on the programme, but he's expanded on what happened, and that he and his fellow officers were told to halt an inquiry into the activities of Cyril Smith by senior police officers. Now, that can only mean that there was some sort of cover-up going on. We learned today also that Lord Janner is to face no further action over charges of child sexual abuse, very detailed charges if you read your newspaper. I'm not going to go into what they were, because at this time of day, frankly, you don't want to know. But they were, shall we say, on the worst end of this. 0345 6060 973 if you want to give your reaction. First of all, though, let's talk to Liz Duck, specialist abuse lawyer from Slater and Gordon. She represents around 168 victims of Jimmy Savile. Liz, thanks for talking to us again. And we've talked quite often on this subject over the last couple of years. And each time I talk to you, there's something else that is even more profoundly shocking than the last time. And I can't get my head into the head of the senior police officers who ordered their colleagues to stop the investigation into Cyril Smith. What can have motivated them?
I really don't know, and I really can't comment because we don't know what's happened there. But what we do know from today is that today represents another example where allegations were made against Janner in 1990, and that those investigations weren't pursued further for whatever reason, and that needs to be the subject of an inquiry. And of course he wouldn't have been suffering from any sort of senile dementia there and could have stood trial. So today is another example of an opportunity for someone to have faced justice and to have faced these allegations in a court, and for those allegations to have been tried properly in a court of law, where that opportunity has been lost, and it's just absolutely disgraceful.
The problem is, though, he apparently has senile dementia, which means that he wouldn't be fit to stand trial. I have to say I'm reminded of the Ernest Saunders case here, but
Yes.
He has apparently undergone medical examination, so who am I to question that?
Indeed, but it is quite unusual for a decision to have been made at this level by the DPP, and you'll have seen today that the police themselves have expressed their extreme dissatisfaction with the decision in the light of the evidence. Normally what happens is where there is sufficient evidence to commit for trial, it is actually a matter for a judge to assess whether or not someone is fit to stand trial, and that might have given both the alleged victims and the public a bit more reassurance. What really concerns me here is that we have yet another example where people are going to say there's been some sort of a cover-up, it's been brushed under the carpet, justice hasn't seemed to be done, and we must get to the state where people have confidence in our legal system, and that's what really concerns me.
And all of this just does fuel more rumours of an establishment cover-up. Liz, thank you very much. That's Liz Ducks from Slater Gordon. Right, over to your calls. Lots coming in. 0345 6060 973. Ian is in Palmer's Green. Hello, Ian.
Oh, yeah, good afternoon, Ian. Thank you for having me on the show. My contribution, I just really wanted to answer the question as to why has there been this historical cover-up? Obviously, there's lots of conspiracy theories. I blog and tweet extensively about it. I've been given one from a former special branch officer and a serving MI5 officer. Is really simple. I'm not condoning what I'm about to say, by the way. I want to make that really, really clear. Back in the late 70s, early 80s, we were still technically in the Cold War. So where these public officials have been abusing children and it's been covered up, it's not because of the officials themselves, but it's because of the officers of state that they held, and they could have been compromised or blackmailed by the Russians.
Well, Cyril Smith was an MP. He didn't hold any office of state apart from being a member of Parliament. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that he couldn't be blackmailed, but, I mean, he clearly wasn't.
But well, we don't know. But
that's true.
It's the perception that people in public office could be blackmailed, and where that could lead, obviously, hence the Official Secrets Act and all the rest of it, and then obviously things being compromised. So I'm not suggesting that that's right under any circumstances, but that's the reasons that have been given to me by two senior people, and I believe them, and I believe it, and to me it sort of makes sense. I'm not justifying it.
OK, Ian, thank you very much. News headlines with Ros Unwin.
Leicestershire Police says it will challenge a decision not to prosecute suspended Labour peer Lord Janner over alleged child sex abuse. An ex-undercover police officer has told LBC he was told to release 5 men in the 1970s who admitted being involved in a paedophile ring with former MP Cyril Smith.
It's 5:55. Let's go back to your calls on Cyril Smith, on Greville Janner, which we've been talking about over the last hour. Several tweets coming in and texts. Anna in Northwood says, your caller Sarah is an amazing, strong woman. I think your comment about there might be young children listening was inconsiderate, as no one cared about her feelings as a 13-year-old young girl being raped. There was no need for that comment. Well, I'll leave people to make their own judgment on that one. Joe is in Cheshunt. Hello, Joe.
Hi, Ian. It's just enough's enough, I think. I've been trying to work out why this whole thing has affected me so much. I'm so angry all the time, and can't stop thinking about it all. And I think it's because I'm of the same generation as yourself and a lot of the LBC presenters, and this was our childhood. Like, it's almost there for the grace of God go I. And I think, the whole story with Greville Janner, how many more are they going to wait for to be diagnosed? We've just had Leon Britton, like, the news about him didn't come out, the allegations, until after he'd gone. The situation with Greville Janner, if the Director of Public Prosecutions has decided not to proceed, that in itself is disgusting. The next step that can be taken is, if there aren't any charges being brought, then it's free for the media. Congratulations to LBC, Tomorrow News, everyone, Simon Danchuk, that are bringing this out, because it has to come out. This was our childhood.
Well, I totally agree with you. I mean, I've been around politics for 30 years now, and I'm continually shocked by what I see. I didn't hear about Cyril Smith in the 1980s when I worked in Parliament. I didn't hear about Leon Britton. I have heard rumours subsequent to that, I have to say, and I'm sure there will be other people that are outed over the course of the next few months. What we have to remember, of course, is that innocent until proven guilty, blah blah blah. But we have to make sure that there won't be any kind of establishment cover-up in the future. There clearly has been in the past. We've heard that from John. So the ex-policeman that we heard from in the first quarter of this hour. So I think it is up to organisations like us, like Exaro News, to keep campaigning on this and to make sure that no stone is left unturned. Joe, thank you for that. Sam has tweeted about your last call. It may be nothing, but Harun Kassir was born in India, who owned the Elm Guest House. He owned it with his wife. Well, we'll follow that one up. I know I can see my producer talking to Sarah for quite some time, so we'll see where that leads. We are going to try and take some more of your calls in the next hour on this. I want to get everyone who's called in on this on the air at some point over the course of the next hour or so. But we are going to move on after 6, and I want to talk...
From Global's newsroom at 6 o'clock, campaigners are calling for an inquiry into why sex abuse claims against former MP Lord Janner in the early 1990s were not pursued. The CPS says it should have prosecuted the 86-year-old in the past, but it won't now, as he has severe dementia and is not well enough to stand trial. His family insist he's innocent of any wrongdoing. Lawyer Liz Dux, who represents some of Jimmy Savile's victims, has been speaking to Ian.
Those investigations weren't pursued further for whatever reason, and that needs to be the subject of an inquiry. And of course he wouldn't have been suffering from any sort of senile dementia there and could have stood trial.
An ex-undercover police officer has exclusively told LBC he was instructed in the 1970s to release 5 men who admitted being involved in a paedophile ring with former MP Cyril Smith. John, not his real name, says a police operation into the group was shut down after the men said they were connected to the late Liberal politician. Labour's Simon Danchuk, who has campaigned on the issue, has told Ian he hopes John's interview will encourage more people with information to come forward.
The Prime Minister also said relatively recently that he didn't think anybody would be prosecuted under the Official Secrets Act for sharing this sort of information, but there is a real reticence, and I understand it from former police officers and probably others actually in terms of sharing what they know, but I do think the dam has been broken.
Hello, very good evening. It's Ian Dale at Drive here on LBC. I have to say that was one of the most incredible hours I think I've ever experienced here on LBC. Some incredible calls. We will try and get to a few more of them over the course of the next 2 hours. After 7 we're going to be